Hi, Mr. Traeger here. Today I'm doing a vodcast on identity. That's going to be our focus for today. We've been learning about assets and how to build assets into our lives and how assets can improve our lives. And today we're going to give you a little bit more, I guess, muscle to the bone in a sense of how we can improve who we are and improving our identity and creating a healthy identity. Now, the big thing to understand with creating your identity or building a healthy identity is that there's two requirements. The first requirement is that you need to accept who you are. You got to accept that you're not perfect. You got to accept that that you are a human being and that you can't do everything on your own. And second of all, you have to commit to wanting to improve who you are. First of all, recognizing that you are human, you would know that we can always improve. And so by committing to that self-improvement is definitely going to benefit you in terms of applying some of these strategies, some of these skills that we're going to be talking about. So first of all, we're going to look at our identity and what that really entails. And our identity is a lot of times simply who we are. First of all, the first step in building a healthy identity is to recognize our strengths and our weaknesses. Like I said before, you have to understand that we're all good at things and we all can improve in certain areas. A lot of times the media will tell us things, like you have to be perfect, you have to look perfect, you've got to be strong or you got to be, beautiful or whatever the media might tell us. And that's Hollywood. You have to understand that no one's perfect and we all need help in certain areas. But also, I don't want to say too much about how we're not perfect, because we are good at things, and sometimes we downplay that. We downplay the things that we're actually good at. And so, with understanding our strengths and weaknesses, what we need to do is take pride in what we're good at. Don't be afraid to do that. Don't be afraid to be able to look yourself in the mirror and say, "I'm good at sports. I'm good at playing an instrument. I'm a good listener." Take some pride in that. Be happy with some of those gifts that you were born with, and there's a reason why you have those. And basically, with weaknesses, you don't want to be overcritical. A lot of times we take ourselves way too seriously, and in reality, people who take themselves way too seriously, in a lot of cases, think that more people are paying attention to them than they really are. There's actually an experiment done at a major university where a college professor wanted to do a study on how many people really paid attention, I guess I should say, of what was going on with other people. And what he did was he had, I want to say it was like 10 people in the class wear a T-shirt that had a picture of Kenny Rogers on it, Kenny Rogers' face. I keep getting this message up. So what he did was he had these students wear these T-shirts to class one day, and then they just mingled. They just did their normal thing. And then the next day, the teacher or professor asked the question to the class, how many of you recognize, or how many of you remember anyone wearing a shirt with a big face on it? More importantly, how many of you remember anyone wearing a shirt that had Kenny Rogers' face on it? And only about 20% of the class remembered or recognized that other people were wearing a T-shirt with Kenny Rogers' face on it. And what that shows a little bit is that people aren't paying attention as much as we seem to think that they are. And so that's one thing, is to not be too hard on yourself. Don't be too overcritical of your weaknesses and the areas that you're struggling in. The second thing is demonstrate positive values. And values are the things that we believe in. They're beliefs on what's important to us. They're beliefs in things that we feel are important in life. And with those values, what it does is it reflects what we value, and it reflects our character in terms of the behavior that we engage in. So how we behave is a bigger measurement of who we are, a bigger measurement of our character than what we say. If we talk about how we hate when people lie to us, but then we turn around and lie, what we're really saying is that I'm a liar, and that's okay. And so that's where these values become very important. We have to pay very close attention with what our behavior says, because you guys know as well as anybody, the way someone acts speaks a lot louder than the words that they say. Developing a purpose in life. And this is important because it's basically setting up goals. What kind of goals do you want to set for yourself? You need to be moving in a direction where you're going to be going someplace. You need to have short-term goals such as I'm going to get an A in the class or I'm going to pass this test next week. You need to have long-term goals. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to get a scholarship. I'm going to become a doctor. I'm going to get a job as a teacher. I'm going to open my own business. I mean, you've got to have those things that you're moving towards. If you don't have an idea of where you want to go, how do you know if you're on the right path? The only way that you can get to a destination is to be moving in a direction. And if you're not moving in any direction because you don't know where you want to go, you're probably not going to end up where you want to. And so one of the first things to do is to really establish what you want to accomplish in life, kind of the direction you want to go. And if it changes, it changes. That's fine. It may change and you go a different direction, and that's okay, but you're working towards something. And so that's an important part of what you need to do to create that identity. You've got to be working towards something in your life. Find what that is and start making decisions to get you pointed in that direction and start working down that path so you have a vision of where you want to be. Number 4 is forming meaningful relationships. We are social creatures. We need to have those relationships. Some people are more comfortable with, I guess, a bigger set of relationships than others. It doesn't mean that we have to have a lot of friends. It doesn't mean that we have to be super outgoing. But we need to form some meaningful relationships with people, whether that be meaningful relationships within our families, within our friend groups, our peer groups. And what creating those relationships does is it creates a sense of support, a sense of belonging, and a sense of security. And this is what creates a confident person. When someone feels that they belong to a group, they feel that they're supported and cared about, it creates a sense of security for them, and it gives them a sense of confidence that it's okay for them to be who they are. And they don't always have to be on edge or on guard or feel like they have to pretend to be someone that they're not because they know they're accepted for who they are. And that's what relationships are important. But this is where true confidence comes from. And so when people are struggling with confidence, a lot of times they're also struggling with being real in relationships as well. Next, contributing to the community, and this is where community service, volunteering, volunteering your time, getting involved with different types of groups, both in the school and in the community, is very important. And what community involvement does is it allows you to, and you can look at it however you want, either giving back or paying it forward. And what paying it forward means is that you are doing things proactive, so that in return it's a better world in that regard. You're paying it forward so that maybe when you need some help, someone will be there to help you. It's kind of that idea. And that's the important part of serving in a community and even working in a school. I mean, that's your community. Being involved in clubs, for example, the Optimist Club, a lot of different like Spanish Honor Society or National Honor Society or any of these different types of clubs that are out there do a lot of different types of things to help serve the school that they're in. Student council, another example. Students who give up some time to be able to serve as the president of their class or vice president or treasurer, any of those offices, being on homecoming committee, things like that, where you're actively involved in the community that you're a part of. And this is where a sense of accomplishment comes from. You feel like you do something. You feel like what you're doing matters. You're buying into something instead of just criticizing everything that's going on around you. You're a part of it. You have a say. You might even be able to come up with some solutions to be able to fix some areas or make some areas better. And that's the important part of serving in a community is not only what the community gets from you being a part of it, but also what you gain in terms of that sense of accomplishment that what I do matters. Number 6, avoiding unhealthy risk behaviors. And what that is everything. I don't know. I want to say everything. A lot of things involve risk, and not all risk is bad. Taking a class that you think might be a little bit tough, that's a risk because you're risking possibly not getting as good of grades. But at the same time, what are you going to gain from that class? You're probably going to gain quite a bit, even though you risk something. Starting your own business, you take a risk, but the return on that investment could be really, really good. You could make a lot of money. You could create a a good product for the community. You could have that sense that, that sense of power that I'm working for myself and I'm doing something that I've created. The unhealthy risk behaviors, that's going to be the stuff that's dangerous. You don't have a very good return on investment. Things like drugs, alcohol, smoking, things like that. Those kinds of choices are going to have a negative effect on your health. They're going to possibly have a negative effect on other people. And so we want to be very careful in terms of the risk that we take and look at the return on my investment. What is that return going to be? Drugs and alcohol, most people know that typically doesn't have a good rate of return. Whereas investing in tougher classes, investing in college, investing in relationships, investing in those kinds of things typically is going to have a high rate of return. There's still risk involved, but the risk is minimal compared to the return that you get from being a part of those. And that's what we have to weigh out when we make those kinds of decisions. So taking good, solid, healthy risks is a great step towards building a healthy identity. And lastly, having realistic patterns of thinking. And again, this ties into I think the very first one that we talked about, which was recognizing our strengths and weaknesses. Sometimes we tend to, again, either be too hard on ourselves or we think that other people are going to be too hard on us. And that may be the case sometimes, but it's usually more the exception than the rule in most cases. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're realistic in how we're thinking about ourselves and about our situation. And so we want to talk a little bit about positive self-talk, because you can hear enough of the negative stuff going on all around you. And a lot of times, most of us talk worse to ourselves than we would talk to somebody else. I've asked this tons of times to people. I know they've done studies on this. But if somebody makes a mistake, somebody screws up, someone does something maybe embarrassing or anything like that, and I ask those individuals, what would you say to that person? Most of the time, they would say things like, oh, I would tell them, don't worry about it. I would tell them, oh, I've done that before. It's no big deal. You would say some things a lot of times to reassure that person that it's okay. You're human and it's all right. But what do we say to ourselves? We trip in the hallway and fall down. We drop our books. We spill something on our shirt, first thing in the morning. What do we say? I'm such an idiot. I look so stupid. Everybody's going to be staring at me. What would you say to a friend that same thing would happen to? A lot of times we would say, it's okay. Don't worry about it. It's not even really noticeable. And so we've got to start paying attention to how we talk to ourselves, because we can tear ourselves down a lot more than what other people sometimes will tear us down, or what we think. And there's this thing called self-fulfilling prophecy. And for those of you maybe who have never heard of this term before, I'm willing to bet most of you have never heard this term before. But self-fulfilling prophecy simply means that I'm going to believe what I hear most of the time. If I hear negative things most of the time, that's what I'm going to believe to be true. If I hear positive things most of the time, that's what I'm going to believe to be true. Whether it's true or not, it doesn't matter. It's what I hear the most I'm going to tend to believe. That's the self-fulfilling prophecy. Prophecy is a prediction. And I could take a student. I've done this plenty of times in class before. I could take a student and I could say, let's say that I tell this person that they have a big nose, and maybe their nose is fine, but for whatever reason they walk into class and I say something like, "Phew, man, your nose is pretty big. How do you walk around with that thing? Doesn't that hurt your neck? And immediately, and I'm using it for an example, just like I'm doing now. Okay, I'd use it as an example. Immediately, the person starts to become self-conscious about their nose. Why? Because they're hearing it over and over and over again, and maybe their nose is fine. And I tell them that their nose is fine. I'm just using you for an example. They already start to get self-conscious because that's what they're hearing, and they start to believe it, whether it's true or not. And so what we have to start doing is we have to start talking to ourselves in positive ways and telling ourselves positive things about ourselves, and we'll start to believe that. Because it doesn't matter if other people are saying it. What matters is what message are we hearing most of the time. And that's where that positive self-talk has to come in. I heard a story one time about a junkyard owner who had 2 dogs, and they're both mean dogs. And one person asked the junkyard owner, he said, if those 2 dogs were to get in a fight, which one would win? And the junkyard owner said, well, whichever dog I fed the most, that's the one that would win. And the point being is that whatever side of us that we feed the most, that's the side that's going to win. If we're going to feed the positive side, that's going to win. If we feed the negative side, that's what's going to win. And so which dog do you want to feed within yourselves? And what we're saying about positive identity is if we want to build that identity, we want to become a better person and make that stronger, we need to start feeding that positive dog. We need to start feeding ourselves with those positive messages. And then also we need to be wise about constructive criticism. And what constructive criticism is it's a non-hostile way to communicate problems and to encourage other people. All right, and that's key to understand. Constructive criticism is not, I guess, tearing somebody down. It's not pointing out somebody's faults, and that's the sole goal. The main point of constructive criticism is to encourage improvement. That's huge. Okay, and we want to do this in a non-hostile way. Now we want to criticize ourselves that way, but also if a situation arises, to use constructive criticism for somebody else, especially when we think that they're doing something that's maybe not healthy, something that's maybe dangerous, something that's harmful, and we want to help turn that around so that they'll make healthy decisions. And that's what constructive criticism is we're pointing out, hey, you're going in this direction and that's not good. Here's what I would suggest you do instead, or here's what I want you to do instead, because it's going to be better for you. It's going to be better for us, or it's going to be better for our group, for our class, whatever that may be. And that's what constructive criticism is. And so when you hear that coming towards you, someone's using constructive criticism, to not take offense to that, to look at that as an opportunity to say, hey, here's an opportunity for improvement. This is something that a person sees in me, and maybe they've got a point. I need to listen to this, okay? And that's what constructive criticism, where that comes into play. So, using some of these areas, some of these points that we went through today, these 7 points, is going to help us as we go through life create a positive, healthy, strong identity. We want to make sure that we go through life with that attitude of, I want to continue to improve myself. And the hard part about that is that typically means we've got to work on the things that we're not the greatest at, because the things we're already good at, we don't need to worry about. And sometimes it's hard for us to look at some of the areas where we could use some improvement. But the more we do it, the easier it gets. And that's one thing we need to remember as we're creating this identity as we go through life. Don't take ourselves too seriously, and be committed to saying, hey, I want to become a better person, and I'm willing to do some of the work that it's going to take to do that. All right? Okay, well, that's it for Healthy Identity. We'll see you next time. This is Mr. Traeger signing out.